Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Sony Alpha A7R. As you may have noticed, I've got the A7 with the kit lens, which is priced at $1999.99 for the package you see right here, on top of the A7R, and that's because they are very similar cameras with very different price points. The kit you're looking at here is priced at $1999.99, body alone $1699.99. Sony does have some promotions going on right now directly through their own store and website, as well as many of their authorized retailers where they are bundling flashes as well as discounting any lens that is FE, full frame E-mount lens, that you pick up with your camera of choice, which is the A7 or A7R in this case. They'll knock $200 off the lens. So $650 total savings is essentially the pitch now. That's the current sale, and I believe that goes through sometime in March. All things said, the 24 megapixel sensor that's in the A7 is groundbreaking in its own right, because you're looking at a body that is only slightly larger than Sony's previous generation NEX cameras, which have now also become part of the Alpha lineup. But you are given in the A7 and A7R the Pro feature set that really was missing from the NEX mirrorless lineup. So beyond only having an aps-c sensor and clearly making the transition to full frame like we have here in the A7 and A7R, we have ergonomics to give us basically the exact feel we expect from a digital SLR, despite the fact that we don't have the bulk and weight. And that's not to say that the full-frame lenses aren't going to end up being very similar to the same size as traditional full-frame lenses, because they have to be. But the fact that you do have the E-mount here makes both the A7 and A7R perfect for anyone who has legacy glass from any manufacturer, because with a very inexpensive adapter, you are easily able to put any glass on here and shoot in manual mode. So really a very versatile camera, and again, I'm referring to the A7, the less expensive model that I'm not unboxing today. And also you should be taking a look at this camera, because the A7R is virtually identical in terms of build and look and feel. There are some differences in terms of a little bit more metallics are employed in the A7R that I'm about to unbox. But that $2,300 price point that the R carries is really, again, all about the sensor, the fact that it does not have a low-pass filter. In addition to that, both cameras are weather-sealed, something I didn't mention before, and do have Wi-Fi and NFC. With that said, I'm going to pop this open and start to get this thing out of here. Also, the A7R does not have the contrast and phase detection autofocus system. In fact, its autofocus is slightly slower than that of the A7. So I think it's a negligible difference. I think it's 4.5 frames per second as opposed to 5 with continuous. But neither camera is a speedster. This is really not designed to replace a dedicated full-frame camera designed for sports photography. In fact, you can certainly try. It's just not an ideal option because of that frame per second count that I just gave you. But this camera is all about resolution. So we've got our warranty, basically all of the traditional paperwork you would expect. Let's go ahead and get down to business here. And there we have a package that looks, well, exactly like what I traditionally see from Sony. In fact, an A7 strap, which is kind of funny considering this is the R, but I guess they weren't going to design a strap just for the camera. Let's get the camera right over here. Show you what else is in the box. We've got our W series battery. This is the exact same battery that's been used throughout the NEX lineup, and will also be used in the A6000, and also, of course, is currently in the A5000, the latest members to the Alpha family that are mirrorless aps-c cameras, also based around the E-mount. Remember, you can use E-mount aps-c lenses on this camera. They will be cropped down to 16 megapixels, which basically gives you the same performance as something like the NEX 6 or any of the current, or older, I should say, 16 megapixel aps-c NEX cameras. Micro USB cable for charging and file transfer. You will be charging this battery on board in the body. That is not something that is new with Sony. And here we have our wall adapter that you're going to connect this to the camera and then charge the battery on board. And I think that pretty much rounds things out. I'll see if there's anything else hiding underneath in there. But I do believe that is everything. Appears so. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the A7R. So this is all about resolution, and basically it's an equalizer. You know, the A7 gives an incredibly affordable full-frame mirrorless option, and here we've got a camera that gives yet another option, one that matches the industry standard essentially when it comes to full-frame, high-resolution imaging. With regard to video capture, both this camera and the A7 have the same quality modes. You're looking at AVC HD, 1080p, 60p, or 24p at 28 megabits. That's at its highest setting. There are several lower or more compressed formats below that, and then MP4 for quick sharing. So as you may have already noticed, the entire top of this camera, as I mentioned, the layout, basically identical to what we have with the A7. And you can see it right there. I'll try to get the box out of the way here since we've already gone through the contents. And you can see they are pretty much identical. And it really comes down to build. As I mentioned before, a little bit more metallics employed here. The base plate, this entire front piece here is actually metal, whereas on the A7 it is plastic. But this is not something that I would ever allow, at least for me personally, to sway me in my decision. Clearly, if you're interested in the A7R, it should be because of its actual sensor. No electronic first curtain, so a lot of people complain about the loud shutter noise from the A7R. That's something I also want to point out, and that's something that really isn't an issue with the A7. The A7 is loud, but I think it's really a lousy complaint that people have about the shutter sound on either of these cameras, because any full-frame camera is going to make a pretty decent amount of noise other than the RX1 and RX1R, and that leads me to say, so, you know, just show me the camera, that silent hero that you own and use, especially that comes in this form factor. All of that said, let's just go around the body. NFC point right here for contact to launch the Play Memories app. You do have access to Sony's Play Memories application store, which is really now a great utility, something that no one else in the industry really has. Your access to the memory card bay right here. That is a deviation from Sony in the past, and really a better placement in my opinion than where they used to go, which was here on the bottom where the battery bay is. Again, the W battery pops right in there, and you have to use that button in order to make sure that the battery bay is closed. The LCD, exactly the same as the one on the A7. It does articulate, has a pretty solid range of motion, and it is a high quality display. Much like the OLED viewfinder, you can see the top mounted sensor right there, which detects whether or not you're using the screen or of course the viewfinder, and auto switches between the two. If it bothers you, you can turn that off. This is a highly customizable camera, much like the A7, and that's really where it does differentiate itself from all of Sony's mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras, even beyond the fact that it does have that incredible beast of a sensor hiding inside this, you know, really palmable body. So that's what's amazing about this. You've got a multi-interface shoe. Sony has standardized this across all of their top-tier cameras now, and there are a wide variety of accessories, whether we're talking about microphones that are standard level, shotgun style, all the way up to XLR. You can, you know, pretty much pick from a variety of Sony flashes. There are also third-party adapters to go above and beyond that. Beyond those options, I mean, it really just gives you, again, a far more professional specification and feature than any other mirrorless option on the market, especially since we've got full frame under the hood. We have a regular mode dial right here, our shutter button, power button, or I should say switch, Again, all identical to what we have on the A7. A dedicated exposure compensation dial, one C1 programmable button right there. We have a finger dial and a thumb dial. This is, again, exactly the same as the A7. Our microphones flank the actual OLED viewfinder right here. And really, it just is a great camera. I know that because I've been shooting with the A7, and it just has redefined expectations for what you can crank out of a camera in this class, or I should say size or footprint, because you've got full frame capability now in something that really is not much larger than Sony's aps-c mirrorless cameras, which already in many ways bested much of the competition. And the new A6000, very promising with its autofocus. In fact, that's one of the features I would look forward to in the refresh of the camera we're looking at right here. So only contrast detection here on autofocus, a little bit slower, but no low pass filter, much higher resolution. This puts it right up there with Nikon's best-in-class full frame offerings, which again would be 4 times the size of this camera. I will be getting the Zeiss Zoom to pair with this, and you know, the actual native FE lenses right now are fairly limited, but that is going to change. So I will be reviewing the Zeiss 24-70 f4. I should have that sometime this coming week, and also eventually plan to at least investigate the 70-200 f4 that Sony will be launching. So some interesting lenses, although yes, a very shallow list at launch. Still a very versatile camera. In terms of ergonomics, fantastic. That's from experience with the A7. Watch my full review on that, the digitally digested review, if you're interested to know exactly what to expect out of this line. And I'll eventually, of course, report back on whether or not I think the price difference for the R is justified. If you're a professional, it pretty much is a no-brainer. I think that's obvious. I don't think I had to tell anyone that. But for someone who isn't a pro, it's definitely tough to make the argument for this much resolution, because unless you're doing incredibly large prints, you don't necessarily need it. But for many users out there, I think just the ability to crop to your heart's content is what something like the A7R offers you. So that's why there's no lens at launch, because you don't really have any glass at launch that matches this sensor capability. And again, that sensor is just a beast. There you have it. And I just look forward to using it finally. Can't wait for the Zeiss lens to arrive. Also picked up the flash, which I will bring into frame right now, the 60M. So I will be unboxing and reviewing this as well, which is a solid pickup in the current discount that Sony's running. I mean, it only ends up being $100 more. And in terms of accessories for this camera, a much more solid offering there too. You've got a vertical grip, which is already down to $250, originally retailed for $300. And it's just a great camera, and I know what to expect here. You do have to be a little bit more careful when shooting with this over something like the A7, and that's because, well, with any full-frame camera, if you try to treat it like a point-and-shoot, you're going to get some relatively poor results. But clearly that's not the market this camera is after, and you can see that in the customizable buttons. I didn't mention the C2 over here, menu, and then, of course, just the balance of the body. On the left side of the camera, we've got the exact same doors that we have on the A7, which give you access to both a line in and out for audio, and then you've also got your multi-port, which is the micro USB port, and your HDMI for raw output. Essentially, if you want to be able to grade your own video, you have that option here. So you get a clean HDMI out. This is another thing that Sony's been doing with all of their flagship cameras as of late. The RX10, the A7, and even more to come, I believe. It's just something that Sony realizes is a desirable feature in this price point and class of product. So a lot to like here in the A7R. Whether or not you really need it as opposed to something like the A7 comes down to, as I mentioned before, the actual resolution, in my opinion. That is the bottom line. And if you're a pro, then the option is fairly simple. Then again, there are benefits to the A7, as I mentioned, like the the hybrid autofocus system. But I'll let all of you know whether or not I even think that's an actual true benefit at the end of the day. Just looking if there's anything else here, because I didn't show the back of the box, but essentially it just sums up everything I've been mentioning. I did not discuss the Bion's X processor in here, and I should have. It's not as new as it used to be, but it is finding its way into all of Sony's latest and greatest cameras now, and it really is a fantastic chip that drives, in my opinion, some of the best performance we've ever seen when it comes to JPEG engine, as well as just in-body processing, something that a lot of people generally are critical with Sony, or have been about Sony in the past. But beyond that, again, also I didn't point out the ISO range, 100 to 25.6, which is the same on the A7. And then there are all of the accessories essentially out there right now. If you want to use A-mount full frame lenses, pick up the EA4, excuse me, and that will give you even faster autofocus if you desire it. But if you're using legacy glass, it's really simple to pick up inexpensive adapters and just, use peaking and go that route. So a lot to like in the A7R. Of course, I will be following up on this camera. I know this was a long unboxing, but highly anticipated, and again, if it wasn't clear already, really excited by the R, because it does really represent, in the same way the A7, as I mentioned in that video, the culmination of Sony's digital imaging business, especially within mirrorless, because all of a sudden we've got a camera that's just unmatched, and really I can't find anyone who dislikes it. Sure, it has limitations. It is still a compromise, but the compromise is the best we've ever seen. So a lot to like here, and a lot less expensive than a Leica. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.